Join us tonight, former Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney. She's the author of a new book, Oath and Honor, a memoir and a warning. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Brett.
Before we talk about the book and all the specifics in here, I do want to ask and tap your foreign policy expertise in your old job and how you think the Biden administration is doing with Israel, Hamas, and where they stand now.
I worry very much that the Biden administration is beginning to abandon Israel, and I think we're in a situation where Hamas must be destroyed. If Israel wants to make sure they don't face another October 7th, Hamas has to be destroyed.
And do you see a creeping off of that?
I do, yeah. I mean, I think that in the initial days after the attack, President Biden was saying the right things and expressing strong solidarity with Israel. But now I think we're seeing a sense of sort of pushing Israel to do perhaps less than the complete destruction of Hamas. And I think it's very important that backing off not happen.
All right, I want to read a section, a quote from your book, Oath and Honor. Today, none of us can tell if the story of January 6th is nearing its end or is only just beginning. We may have darker chapters ahead. Trump has told us that he thinks the Constitution can and should be suspended when necessary, that what happened on January 6th was justified, that in a second Trump presidency he would seek retribution, and much more. He knows judicial rulings have force only if the executive branch enforces them, so he won't. You're fearful of a second Trump presidency.
I am. I think that, we know what he will do. He's already done it. We saw what he did after the 2020 election, obviously what he did to try to seize power in 2020, and of course on January 6th. And he tells us every day. And if you look at the steps that he would have to take in terms of simply refusing to enforce court orders or comply with court orders with which he disagrees, putting people in key positions as Attorney General, for example, or as head of OLC, unethical lawyers who would help him, frankly, blow through many of the guardrails of our Constitution. I think it's a very real concern that he would take steps very quickly that would unravel the rule of law.
This is the Wall Street Journal. This is not a MAGA, op-ed here. And they say Trump as dictator is a classic case of projection. Abuse executive power, ignore the law, run roughshod over individual liberties, retaliate against political opponents. Mr. Biden and his allies have done exactly what they warned Mr. Trump will do if he returns to the White House. Unlike Mr. Biden, however, Mr. Trump would have to contend with a hostile media and a federal bureaucracy that would be throwing pots, pans, and candlesticks at him at every step.
Well, I think they're wrong. I think if you look at, we don't have to guess about what next President Trump would do because he did it before. And he would not have around him the people that were around him, the people, frankly, that the country will hear from as his trial moves forward, who were all his appointees, people that he appointed to the White House counsel's office, the Department of Justice, his own family, people that told him on January 6th, as you and I were talking that day, actually, that he needed to tell the mob to go home. People who told him that what he was doing was illegal. Those people won't be around him. And, the rulings of our courts are fundamental to who we are as a constitutional republic. If a president doesn't enforce those rulings, they don't have weight.
Right. But what about the point it made in this op-ed, specifically, and I understand what you're saying about the former president, what you feel about what would happen, but you haven't been vocal. But you haven't been vocal about President Biden when, like, executive orders to cancel student loan, ban evictions, mandate COVID vaccines. Well, here's a list.
I think it's a very different thing.
After the SCOTUS ruling,
are you going to let me answer the question?
Yeah, I am. Just let me list them. After the SCOTUS ruled against it, he still used regulatory means to write off, the student debt, wall off 1.5 million acres of land for fossil fuel. What this basically is saying is that there are things that have been done outside of the rule of federal courts that you haven't weighed in on.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's true that I haven't weighed in on those. And I think a lot of those, if you look at the kinds of things that he's done with respect, for example, to energy policy, with respect to setting aside lands across the West, I've been very vocal that I think those policies are wrong. It's very different from a president. And look, you wrote a book about George Washington. The last chapter of your book is called The Gift of a Peaceful Transition of Power. That is what we're talking about.
Yeah, but this is not about me.
That's right, but that's a very important concept. Let me finish my answer, because every single president, Republican and Democrat, since George Washington, has ensured the peaceful transition of power. Donald Trump tried to seize power. So we can disagree with Biden policies, but the fact that he tried to seize power, the fact that he ignored the rulings of 61 courts, the fact that he ignored his own attorney general, his own White House counsel, who told him what he was saying about the election was false. It wasn't true. His claims were false, and he went out and made them anyway, knowing that. The extent to which he, while a violent mob was assaulting the Capitol, he wouldn't tell them to leave. Instead, he tweeted against his own vice president, and he poured fuel on the flames. Those are lines that can't be crossed. And look, this isn't about policy. I voted with Donald Trump 93% of the time. This is about the nation. It's about the republic. It's about the Constitution.
And we've covered all elements of January 6th, and I had an interview with the former president where I told him that he did not win the election. That said, he's winning this election.
That's right.
Overwhelmingly. If you look at the polls, he is up 63% to his nearest rival, 12%. In Iowa, the Des Moines Register, 51%. You keep on going down state by state. What is not getting across if your message is so urgent on these other channels and other places? What is not happening to the electorate to see that?
Well, I think you're actually seeing some movement. There have been other polls out today that show some movement among some of the other candidates. And look, what I would say to Fox viewers, and I worked here for many years, as you know, and the race today presents a number of candidates, Republican candidates, who will abide by the Constitution. And you can have the policies that we all want, the policies, some of which Donald Trump put into place, some of which he didn't. We can have conservative policies without having to torch the Constitution. And so what I would urge people watching today who are going to be voting in those caucuses or in those primaries, vote for somebody else. Do not vote for the person who already tried to seize power.
You lost your primary to Harriet Hagman 2-1. And she said, Liz Cheney has never been in touch with your average person. In 2019, AP said, Wyoming's congressman says a summary of the investigation into whether President Donald Trump election campaign coordinated with Russia confirms what Republicans already knew. The summary of Robert Mueller's investigation says there was no collusion between Trump's 2016 campaign and Russia. Wyoming U.S. Representative Liz Cheney says Democrats for over 2 years have peddled falsehoods and made one scurrilous claim after another involving Trump and Russia. Cheney says in the statement it's time for Democrats to put aside their partisan agenda of attacking Trump and focus on real issues. What do you say to critics who say, listen, all of this, even after you look at January 6th, all of this is about going after Donald Trump, and that his policies, if you look back to his 4 years, are something that they want. So there are voters who obviously feel that way.
Yeah. So I would say a couple things. First of all, I won my primary by 70% of the vote. I could have done that again if I was willing to lie about what Donald Trump did. I wasn't willing to do that. I voted against that impeachment that you're talking about, the first impeachment. I voted against it. But this was different. When you have a president of the United States who attempts to seize power, that goes to the heart of who we are. And that danger is one we can't ignore. And so, again, I would say, look, this is about ensuring that you're going to vote for somebody, that you're going to support somebody who's going to uphold the rule of law. And Donald Trump has demonstrated he won't do that.
At one time you thought about running. Obviously you're not running, but could you get in this race?
You know, I haven't made a decision yet, but it's not about me, Brett. And I say this again, you know, I come here to Fox and I sit in the Charles Krauthammer green room, and I know how revered Charles was by you, by me. And Charles taught us a whole bunch of things, but one of them is that some things have to matter. And rising above politics, rising above partisanship, recognizing our duty to the Constitution is the most conservative of all conservative principles. And so again, this isn't about policy. You know, we started off on Biden administration foreign policy, with which I have big disagreements. His economic policy, big disagreements. It's not about that. It's about whether we're going to support people that are going to uphold the Constitution.
Well, we have a policy here to hear from all sides, and we wanted to invite you to talk about your book. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.